I'm Kathleen Markath at ASL Picture Books, and today we have a very special guest for you, Kimberly Sanzo, and we have so much to share with you, so let's get started. Kimberly is the founder of Language First. In her current work as a speech language pathologist at the American School for the Deaf, she creates therapy activities in ASL that aim to reduce the effects of language deprivation. She is committed to educating parents and professionals on the neurological effects of a late or incomplete language first acquisition. So, could you share with us, first of all, Kim, how Language First was born and created? And
Yeah, sure. So when I first started working at the School for the Deaf, I noticed that a lot of my students' parents were misinformed. They were given the wrong information by the doctors or the audiologists or whoever they initially met with when they found out that their child was deaf or hard of hearing. So then when I eventually started working with the student and they were 8, 9, 10 years old and they had absolutely no language, I was flabbergasted. I was like, why does this kid have no language? And then come to find out, the parents were grossly misinformed and were told not to sign with their child, or were told to implant them when they weren't good candidates and had poor prognosis for acquiring oral language. And so the first couple of years that I worked here, I was like, I need to spread the correct information and get the right information out there, because parents need to know that this is not accurate and it's affecting their child's ability to acquire language because of the information that they're being given. So that's kind of where I started. I was like, well, let me at least just start posting on social media, just get the word out there. And then it just started growing so much faster than I could have ever imagined. So yeah, here we are. Now I offer continuing education for professionals to learn more about best practices for working with deaf and hard of hearing kids, and also different events to help professionals improve their ASL skills, things like that. Yeah.
it is amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That anybody would tell you not to sign to a
I
child.
know. Mm-hmm.
So we talked about that before a little bit. Just how important and how is it different that it's so important for a deaf child to have sign language and from birth, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So I think one big misconception out there is that if a deaf or hard of hearing child has cochlear implants or hearing aids, that they can acquire oral language without an issue. But we know that that's not true. Even with cochlear implants and hearing aids, they're still missing out on a lot of oral language, right? Here and there, bits and pieces, sometimes huge amounts. Whenever their device is off of their head, they're not hearing. So in order to acquire a language fluently from birth, you need to have constant input and robust input, really good grammatical input in that language. And so for deaf or hard of hearing kids who every time their implant or hearing aid is off or broken, or the batteries aren't working, or it has to be charged, or they're swimming and they can't go in the water with it, or they're taking a bath and they can't go in the water with it, or it's the middle of the night and they wake up and they're right, all of those times, or it's too loud, or there's too many people talking, or they don't have good visual access, all of those times they're missing out on bits of language here and there. So then that adds up to a point where they have not acquired a first language fluently. So this is why we argue that they need to be given access to a signed language as well. Not instead of, but as well. That way, all of these times that they're missing out on the oral language, they could have a visual language to be giving them that linguistic input that they need.
Right. Yeah. I know deaf children, taught or not taught, or hard of hearing. I think sometimes we think, well, if a child's deaf, that means they can't hear anything, but they often can hear some sounds, right?
Right.
So yeah, I think it's important that we give them that both languages. They opt both. And what I was pointing to is that lip reading, and say, oh, they're really good at lip reading, but I don't know, when you try that, it's not so easy. But they do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with COVID and wearing masks, it's like hearing for either without seeing.
Oh yeah. Even me with normal hearing, I'm like, what? What'd you say?
Yeah. Right. So what do you tell a parent who, they're live in a hearing world or hearing family, and they have a child who's born hard of hearing or deaf? How do you relay that to them, the importance of signing and speaking?
Well, I try to present it in an evidence-based way. So we know that bilingualism is great for the brain. We know that deaf children need visual access to language. They process the world visually. Everybody needs visual information. We all use visuals. We all look at each other's lips and faces and facial expressions and, use pictures, and that helps us acquire language. So why not give that to a deaf child who needs it even more, right? Learning a signed language actually helps you learn an oral language because it gives you a linguistic basis to learn language, period. So I highly encourage parents to just try their best to learn as much ASL as they can. They don't have to become fluent themselves. They just need to get their child in an environment where there are fluent native signers. So maybe like an infant program where there's deaf professionals there, a deaf mentor, a deaf babysitter, deaf daycare, anything where their child is being exposed to native signers of ASL. And then as the parent, you can learn as much as you can as well, so that you can provide that to your child as well.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think that maybe for the parent, that shock or surprise or possibly fear, like,
Yeah.
well, I don't know anything about that,
Yeah.
but any little bit helps,
Yeah.
correct?
And that's the thing, when as a parent, when you try to learn as much as you can, what you're doing is you are telling your child, I care about who you are. I'm not going to try to change you. I'm going to try to accommodate to you. I'm accepting you the way that you were born. You were born deaf or hard of hearing, and I'm not trying to make you hearing. Therefore, I'm going to help you by attempting to learn some of the language that is most accessible to you. So I think just the act of attempting to learn tells the child a lot without actually saying anything, right? You're telling them that you accept them and you care about them and you want to communicate with them.
It's huge.
Yeah.
I can imagine how huge
Yeah.
of impact it is for a child. I love it. And we talked a little bit about the brain, and I know that you like to study that area as well. So, does the brain of a deaf child actually work different than hearing?
That's a good question. It actually doesn't work any differently. The only difference is that the auditory pathway might not get as much stimulation depending on what their hearing levels are, how much they can hear. Let's take, for example, a child who has severe to profound levels and doesn't get very much stimulation to the auditory centers of the brain, then that part of the brain will then be kind of used to do something else. So it might be taken over for the language part, or it might start, performing a different function. It doesn't just kind of die and never get used again. The brain is very resourceful. And so it just gets adopted and used for another function. So that's a bit of a difference. But when a deaf child is born, there's nothing different about their brain, really. Yeah.
Just developing different areas of it
Right. Yep.
for access.
Yep.
And our brains are fascinating. So, key thing for any child with any hearing loss is to give them language access, both speech and the visual sign language. So many parents are teaching their children baby signs and being surprised and shocked when they start signing before they talk. And sometimes that's different when a child is deaf. Can you address that a little bit?
About using baby signs with them, you mean?
Yeah, because like many parents use the baby sign language and yeah, they're surprised. So when a parent of a deaf child is told, don't teach your child sign language.
Yeah, it's a bit ironic that they tell you to sign with your hearing baby, right? And they tell you not to sign with your deaf baby. So there's another big misconception that if you teach or expose a deaf or hard of hearing baby to sign language, that it will impede their ability to learn oral language. And the reason why this myth kind of came to be is because of what I was just talking about with the brain plasticity, where if a part of your brain is not stimulated, then it becomes useful for something else. And so people kind of took that to mean that if you don't work on spoken language, then signed language will take over that part of the brain, right? But that's not really how it works. Learning a signed language helps bolster your oral language, just as learning any language bolsters another language. Language builds language because it's all feeding the same language centers in the brain. So I think that's where that kind of misconception came from, which is why you often see doctors, pediatricians, ENTs, audiologists telling parents, if you implant your child or if you're going this route where you want them to learn how to listen and speak, then do not sign with them, which is bad advice. That's very bad advice.
It is ironic. So thank you for kind of clearing up
Yeah.
that myth.
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to keep you too long today, but I'd love to hear some more about language first because I know you have so much to offer. You have a membership and
Yeah.
classes. So tell us more about.
Sure. We did just launch a membership in early January. So, what you get with your membership is it's a monthly payment, and every month you get exclusive resources emailed directly to you. And they're a mixture of either activities to use with deaf children that you work with and resources like infographics and handouts that help explain concepts. So, you can either use them for yourself or give them to other people to help explain what's the difference between language and speech, things like that. So you get all of those emailed to you every month. You get a free webinar. So we host usually about 3 to 4 webinars a month, and you get a discount code basically for a free webinar every month. You get a discount off of the Language First annual conference, which is in October. You get exclusive video content as well. So usually videos of me, again, explaining a concept in both ASL and English that you can share with colleagues to help explain things to them. And then we also have monthly discussion boards and Zoom meetings. So it really is a community of people that are, working off of each other and learning from each
Yeah.
other and trying to do better by the deaf and hard of hearing kids that they serve.
Yeah, I think it's so important for, the community of those people to get together and collaborate because
Mm.
you might be doing something that is just so phenomenal that I don't know about.
Yeah,
And I might have a little tip or clue that would
yeah,
help you. I
exactly.
love that
Mhm,
collaborating and
mhm.
sharing knowledge and
Yeah.
information.
Yeah. So funny because when I first started Language First, because I'm a speech pathologist, I just had speech pathologists in mind, right? I was like, I'm just going to change my
Mhm.
field. Like SLPs are the only ones that don't know that don't know what they're doing now. But I just kind of only had my profession in mind. And then as it grew, I realized that other professionals were very interested in this same information, interpreters, teachers of the deaf, audiologists, psychologists. I get a lot of psychologists signing up. So that's what kind of made me realize, oh, it's not just an issue in my field. It's a broader issue and we can all work together to make it better.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm very excited about that. So share with us where people can sign up, become members, and
Yeah.
join your Instagram page. I love
Yeah.
your Instagram
Yeah.
page.
So if you go to languagefirst.org, it's language1st.org. And then you'll see at the top upper right hand corner, you'll see membership. If you click on that, you'll see all the details about what's included. We're also offering group options. So if you have 3 or 4 colleagues that all want to sign up together, we do have a group option for monthly membership. And then, yeah, of course, we're very active on social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, not so much, but we're trying to get better about Twitter. So definitely, follow us there because that's where we post all of the updates about events that we're hosting, the conferences that we host, the webinars, and just good content, just good information.
Good content and busting lots of myths.
Busting lots of myths, exactly.
So, yeah, well, we want to thank you again for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you for having
I
me.
encourage everyone to look at some of your website, check out your videos, your resources, and we'll see you again.
Sounds good. Thank you.